Hello and welcome to the Gibraltar Business Podcast. I'm your host, David Revagliatte. This show explores Gibraltar's business community by meeting the people who are running our economy and finding out what makes them tick. It is sponsored by the Gibraltar International Bank and brought to you by the GFSB, which shares a big passion for business here locally. This season is the first time that you are watching us, thanks to a collaboration with Barton Solutions, and I really hope that you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to the Gibraltar Business Podcast. We're back for a 7th season, so welcome back. This show, we're going to be meeting Jean-Paul Fa. Jean-Paul Fa is the CEO of the OFT and Business. And we're going to be finding out what his plans are since he took over the role in April this year and its direction of travel. So, Jean-Paul, welcome to the Gibraltar Business Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm used to hearing your voice when I'm in the gym, so it's a bit odd to be here and not be hitting the weights, actually.
I don't think, well, this is it. The association of where people listen to podcasts is very personal, I'm learning. So yeah. As a bit of background also, this is the first kind of recorded podcast, so welcome, and thanks for being my first guest on the recorded one.
Great, lovely to be here.
Jean-Paul, obviously I've been doing a bit of research and we've met for lunch or we've talked a few times off camera, if you like. Your career began in law, right? What attracted you to that profession at the start?
To law, to be honest, it was not knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and I thought that studying law would give me a wide range of options. And at the time I applied for Hassan's, for a job at Hassan's, I was fairly surprised that I got it. I thought I would be rejected and I'd be able to go snowboarding for a year. As it happened, I ended up working in the corporate and commercial department for 5 years. And from there we worked on one of the mergers that produced the largest gaming company at the time, bwin Party Entertainment. And I joined them for 2 years before joining government. So I've had a range of different...
Absolutely. And actually, I've met through the 7 seasons that we've had so far, many lawyers have been sat where you are. So I think it's a popular profession here in Gibraltar and actually one that opens a lot of doors, would you say?
It's one that for me, it's given me the opportunity to see law within different spheres. So private practice within a law firm is very, very different to an in-house role, especially at bwin Party, where there were international transactions. It was almost like working in the City of London down in Europort. And then, of course, in government's been a whole journey in itself.
I bet. What led to that transition? Because you mentioned that you were with Hassan's and you went to bwin Party, which you were working with, I guess, before you left. What was that transition to government like, and why did you take that leap?
I took it at the time because the role that was advertised was fairly interesting, and I think it appealed to me in terms of providing something back to the community. The role was for a lawyer within the Ministry for Transport, Tourism, Ports and Commercial Affairs. And interestingly, we set up the Office of Fair Trading when I was carrying out that role. But I had a good relationship with the former financial secretary, Albert Mena. I knew that he was taking on a lot of the higher profile government projects, and I managed to work with him. I was actually working, it's an interesting story, because I was working the summer hour timing during that period when we were working on the joint venture agreement for the power station and the LNG terminal. So I would finish my work at the ministry, and then I'd walk in the blistering heat from Europort up to number 6 and then carry on working with him in the afternoons. And then as that summer and that transaction came to an end, I made a good case to transition over to the office of the FS, where we took on a huge number of projects, and I learned a great deal.
Look, you mentioned something there that a lot of people wouldn't do. You think you finished for the day. A lot of people think, look, I'm finished for the day, right? What motivated you to then join and get involved with other projects?
And for me, it was the excitement of working on the highest profile deals that Gibraltar had to offer, at least from a government perspective at that time, commercially. We've worked on the deals like the affordable home estates and the funding for that. We've worked on the 500 million guarantee and the loan from the guarantee was from the UK government. All of these deals really shape you commercially, and when you're in the room as they're being negotiated and then also executing the transactional documents, it's really fulfilling to see that whole journey of a transaction. I think there are very few places in the world where you actually come up with the concepts, pitch them, and see them evolve all the way through to completion. We saw it with Shell when we were negotiating that deal, that they would have a lawyer that would come in and know these certain terms, there's very, very specific parts of a contract. Then someone else would come in and they would know the size of a screw. And you had a very small team on our side that had to do practically everything.
Yeah. Why is that? Is it because of our size or the agility, or?
Well, I think we're naturally limited by our size, but it means that our people become highly versatile.
See, that as a concept has come through as well with some of the conversations I've had in terms of, do you specialize so much, or do you remain kind of more general but on bigger projects? So
that's really interesting you say that. I'm currently reading a book called Range, and the introduction compares Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. So Tiger Woods is known for being a hyper specialist. When he was 4 years old, his dad would take him to the golf course and he would beat everyone there, and they'd fleece them for some money. And then Roger Federer, when he was 20 years old, was still playing football, still skiing, playing tennis. He was multidisciplinary. And at the time that he started playing tennis more seriously, he was told, oh, well, you can't compete with all of these other kids who have been hyper-specialized. But look, for some people, it clearly works.
I think it absolutely does. And in my experience, definitely, John Paul, has been, you have to be good at what you do, but to be a generalist also does pay, because I think when you are a specialist in your field, that sometimes the opportunities don't exist. You have to kind of put different hats on and kind of go into it. And I think for me, this podcast is definitely that. It's going, well, if someone else won't do it, why don't I do it? And you kind of learn a different skill. So yeah, absolutely kind of relate to that. And you've got to tell me which book that is as well after.
I'll share the link. You've done a great job, I must say. You've done a great job so far with the podcast. So best of luck now with the video.
Thank you. It's funny because you actually reached out to me about a couple of years when I started this, actually. I don't know if you remember, but it's great to have you here, right, finally, to say that when you do something like this, you never know who's listening or watching or anything, so it's really nice when people do step up, give some feedback. So yeah, cool.
and there's a fair but growing number of podcasts locally, which I think also it improves the information that is out there. But you also have an international audience. I've spoken to Graham Jackson, for example, that runs a tax podcast, and he has some fascinating statistics on the number of people that listen to their podcast that are actually outside Gibraltar.
Well, same here. This one, we've actually touched listeners on every single continent, which is crazy because we can go back. So yeah, welcome to everyone, and hi from Gibraltar to wherever you're listening. But it's funny how much interest in what we're doing has such an international reach.
And if any of those listeners are interested in Gibraltar in terms of setting up or relocating their business, we are open for business. So please feel free to get in touch, and we'll help you with anything that we can.
John Paul, coming back to kind of your career and how you have progressed to where you are now, you took over as the CEO of the OFT and business earlier this year. It's a new role, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. It's slightly wider than what the role was previously, in that it also encompasses business. So I'm responsible for the business element of the ministry under Minister Arias Vasquez. In the first instance, that means that we're also taking on business registration. We've got the Gibraltar Enterprise Scheme, which is a scheme for startup businesses that require funding and they're unable to access that funding in the local market, and the government intervenes with participating banks and facilitates that access. And there's a number of other different initiatives, also including sort of a business development side and function outside of the traditional financial sectors that are already served. So I'm working with certain people within government to improve established sectors, and then we're also looking at new sectors that come within the ministry portfolio.
So that is much of a kind of a wider remit, right? I understand.
It is. It's much wider. It allows me to have a wider lens. So when I pick up a particular issue, I don't say this doesn't fall within the remit of the OFT and therefore we don't deal with it. I say, okay, it doesn't fall within the remit of the OFT, but I can see that this impacts business and I want to help you resolve it. So I will then assist that whoever's putting that query or issue to us, I'll take that burden on with them and try and resolve that or find a solution for them.
How's your experience working with Albert Menner on some of these big international projects? Are you hoping that's going to come into this new role and this new remit?
It's a very good question. I think one of the things that Albert certainly did for me is that he effuses energy. So he's a very energetic person himself. He doesn't tell you have to do this work. You find that energy yourself, and I think part of that energy feeds off his.
Right.
So I've almost tried to pick the best parts of his work and his thought processing. He was very good in that he would allow me to sometimes debate some of the things that we were doing with him, and that my understanding increased tenfold, and it made me find the decision process and the decision path, which now I'm applying to other much smaller issues and perhaps in different contexts, but they're value judgments that you make, and I think it's also about seeing how you can add value to different matters. So I've learned a lot from him.
Jean-Paul, you are relatively young to take on a big role. How are you finding that?
There are challenges because I've got a young family, and much as I'd want to stay working until the late hours of the morning, I find that I try and leave at a reasonable hour so I can take my son to Commonwealth Park for a kickabout or Mid-Harbours for some basketball, and then try and help with dinner and put them to bed. But it then means that we're tackling more reading and emails and more work in the evening. But I think after COVID, people are more accepting of that. They'll accept that you don't have to work a really long working day as long as you can get that work done throughout the course of the day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And again, I think it resonates with me and a lot of the guests that I've had here, because I try to make it a point, when we're looking at stories of success or people sharing their story like you are with us today, we look at balance and how, and a lot of the time we glorify, because I work really hard, I achieve this and that. Balance is increasingly there, and I think it's a bit of a trade-off, so that makes sense completely. Do you feel that you achieve balance?
I think I achieve a balance so I've got to give credit to my wife who works incredibly hard. And I think together we find the right balance, and of course to my parents who help out a lot with the kids. So between us all, I think we do achieve that balance. But that's one of the great things that Gibraltar has to offer, that you do have grandparents who really lean in and help those parents that co-work.
So it's the team, the family, the union, and the people behind, supporting you, right?
Yeah.
Jean-Paul, coming back to your plans, I know that the Minister for Business published the strategy for business earlier this year. I've gone through it. I know that lots of the GFSB members and our listeners would have kind of gone through that document. The concept of making business easier came through in those recent plans. What do you mean by making business easier?
Making business easier is our primary objective, so it's what I try and keep at the forefront of our mind whenever we are formulating a policy, reviewing a policy, looking at new legislation. I'm trying to look at it through the prism of business, to the extent that the less time that business spends interacting with government, dealing with any red tape, the more time that business then has to apply to its business and what it's good at. So I'm trying to reduce that and make us as efficient as we possibly can in every sense. That there are various different initiatives that we are trying to deploy to do that. So we're looking at business registration renewal, for example. That is a very manual and laborious process. We're trying to simplify that. One of the main ways we simplified business shortly after releasing that report was through the business licensing interaction. So we created a very easy portal for people to be able to apply for a business license, to extend their business license, and so on.
I think that would be really positive for a lot of the listeners, and actually it is a bit like, the starting a business in Gibraltar has been, or to speaking to people I know, quite a challenge. So what are those changes that you mentioned? Like, have they happened, or?
So some of them have happened, like I've just explained with the application portal. Some of them are in the pipeline, and we're working towards those. Some of those require legislative changes, other ones are policy based. But I think the key point there is that we acknowledge that there's a lot of value within our business community. And if you can start to unlock value for that business community, it means they can be more productive, they can, in turn, the benefit is shared all around.
When we spoke before, obviously we came to record, something you were excited about, we talked about, was the digital renewal that you wanted to kind of bring in. Is that what you're talking about there in terms of businesses accessing the government through digital portals, or?
Yes, that's correct. The vision is to have a one-stop shop where a business can interact with government and see all of the different strands of interaction. And that will be easy for business because they can see at a glance where they are with government, what renewals are coming up. But it also means that us as the government can see where we land in that process. And there's a lot of talented people pushing for that. It's our Chief Secretary, Glenda Martinez, who is fantastic and does have a very strong business background as an entrepreneur himself. So he's backing that what we call an eGov 2.0 project. And then we have some really capable people within digital services and ITLD who are also working towards that aim.
Another area where we kind of touched on, and also is like where there's going to be a future show on the subject of AI, and it's of course it's a theme that comes through most of my conversations, and I think most of our listeners' conversations as well. What's your take on AI?
I love it. Right. I love it. I actually enjoy using it myself, but I also find that people talk about it a lot more than they actually use it. So I've actually gone out of my way to use it as much as possible, whether that is preparing my son with interesting facts for an 8-year-old concerning World War II, which I find very helpful, to actually sitting down with the teams within our department, within each of the different sections. We have team leaders and say, look, I want to adopt this. I think as a government, if we start to adopt this technology now, in any way that we can, it means we start to move towards the front of that curve. And I'm really proud of the work we've done with that up to now. So as part of the OFT, we have 3 different sections. One of those is consumer protection. Another one of those is anti-money laundering regulation for real estate agents. And we've managed to use it in both of those sections. So for the real estates, we've downloaded or we've uploaded all of our internal guidance, all of the legislation, all of our external guidance, and then we've set parameters within the AI model where you can fire off AML-related queries, and it will give you an answer based on those parameters and each of those guidelines and legislation. And we've tested that with a handful of real estate agents, and the result up to now has been really positive. With the consumer protection, again, a very similar effort where we've uploaded the guidelines, and then we can redact a query that comes to us. We can feed it into the AI model, and it will produce a response. So far, it's working well for us.
Would you say that your teams then are pioneering within government, or?
I'm not sure how other departments are using it. I'm positive that they're using it for content. I mean, we're on the social media channels, and you can see that people are using it effectively there. I'm not sure who's using it beyond that, but for us, it's certainly been a fun learning curve, and one that I continue to tell the team. It doesn't matter if we're taking longer to adopt this technology now. It doesn't. It's not fully accurate, and therefore we can't release it in a way that people can rely on it, but it is informative, and we keep improving our own models, because when it makes a mistake, they're logging that mistake, we're sitting round together, we're tightening those parameters so that that mistake isn't repeated. And over time, our model will improve, and we're all very happy about that.
Brilliant. I think it's so refreshing to hear someone in your position as well, like embracing it and going for it, because, I've found that it helps a lot in content production. It helps in lots of different things, but also just experiment and test it and get out there and see if it works for your business.
The worrying part is that it sounds so authoritative. And I think you have to have an element of knowledge and confidence when you are dealing with it. Otherwise, you would think, well, this just knows what it's talking about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't, but because it is so conversational, it's easy to get taken away by it.
I think in the early days, you'd put something and you'd ask it a question, it would come back with an answer, and the answer wasn't accurate, but because it's exactly, you would take it as word, and I think that's kind of changing now, isn't it?
Yeah.
John Paul, one of the kind of challenges, I guess, that a lot of the GFSP members and I think the business community is looking at, or is dealing with, or comes up every so often, is the topic of unlicensed Spanish businesses who may be operating here in Gibraltar. They're a growing concern for many. What's being done to address those unlicensed Spanish businesses?
So what we've done there is we've developed a strategy to tackle that potential unlicensed business. And that strategy isn't one where we hit the streets on day one and start to find those businesses for multiple reasons, but really because I personally don't think that's the right approach to take. I think that with any enforcement would generally have to be preceded by education. So what we've done is we've launched a campaign that's been very successful with what we have as a very limited budget. I'm sure that you're also exposed to limited budgets too.
Yeah.
So we've launched a campaign that informs these Spanish businesses that they do have to be registered in Gibraltar. They do have to be licensed in Gibraltar to carry out business here. We've put that campaign on the Spanish side of the border on that large LED screen that repeats every few minutes. We've also put out that same campaign on social media. We've done a targeted campaign. It's the first time that we've done it ourselves. I think we had over 20,000 impressions on that campaign, which is very impressive. The incredibly impressive statistic is actually that the majority of those impressions were outside Gibraltar, which shows that it is having an impact. And the other thing we've done is we've produced an infographic in Spanish, and we've shared that with the business community here, and that's been shared by our business community with the Spanish business community, who actually welcome that information too, because they say, look, we think that our businesses, if they're carrying on business in Gibraltar, should be properly licensed. So that's the information campaign. We've shared that plan with businesses, and we've told businesses, if you see any business carrying out business activity in Gibraltar and you think that they may not be licensed, get in touch with us, send us a picture, tell us about them, and we'll try and contact them. And again, we'll feed them that information. It means that when we move on to the next phase, which will be an enforcement type phase, the businesses can't say, well, I knew nothing about this. They know full well what they're doing.
On the information side of it, did you see many, obviously you've had loads of impressions, a lot of them from Spain. Did businesses get in touch? Did you have inquiries through that as well? Or
We have had some, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And enforcement. I know that enforcement is something that it's never easy, and it's something that is always challenging. What are the plans there? Can you share some of them? Or?
Sure, absolutely. So one of those is around these, is the non-Gibraltar business, or around unlicensed business. One of the others involves Main Street, and we know that there are businesses that display their goods outside their premises. Their premises is the public highway. Sorry, the premises outside of the public highway outside of their premises is not theirs. That belongs to the people of Gibraltar. That means that if you have someone with a pram or in a wheelchair trying to go down that sort of slightly raised pavement, sometimes they're unable to pass. It also means that Main Street looks cluttered. If every single shop displayed all of their goods outside of their shop, it would look like a street market, and it's not really the image that we want to portray for the main street. So we've been in touch with the chamber, we've been in touch with the GFSB. I know that it's been put on the GFSB newsletter, and it's a campaign that we plan to commence early into New Year, where we will start to engage with these businesses that continue to display goods outside their premises. And again, it's one of informing them first, but eventually that information turns to enforcement when we don't get the results that we expect.
And conversations like this with me and with different, like you mentioned, the chamber. You're going to have events, aren't you, for the GFSB coming up?
Yes, that's correct. We have a business information or essentials event coming up soon, and we're very excited to work with Phoebe and the team to put that together.
Yeah, I think news will be going about that very, very soon, so keep an eye on the GFSB channels for sure. When I was looking at the strategic plan, and I know I read it when you released it, refreshed it just before we met today, one of the other goals, I guess, for business in Gibraltar and for your office would be to develop business in Gibraltar, right? That's
yes.
a huge role. What's the plan? How are you going to approach developing business in Gibraltar?
So the plan there is to, again, it feeds into some of the other work we're doing. So making business easier means that we attract that business to come to Gibraltar. Gibraltar should be a place where people want to come to do business because it's easy. But beyond that, there are also specific sectors that we've identified and we think they are capable of further growth. One of the examples that I always give with this is that if you take our GDP and you take out, for example, the financial sectors, or you take out some of the other larger sectors, you're still left with a whole chunk of that economy. And what I would like to do is develop that and serve that, to say to that part of the economy, what can we do to make you grow? And I think you can see it, for example, with areas like the digital marketing and branding. A lot of the firms that are here may be small, but they pack an international punch. They have international clients, and it feeds in to that creative talent that we have here in Gibraltar. I think you can see that from some of the help that we have here today in recording this podcast.
Yeah, of course, with Barton Solutions is one of them, and there is a lot of potential and a lot of new practices, and I think that is one of the areas. Any other areas that you think have that potential?
There are, and one that's been disclosed by the minister is maritime. Like maritime as a sector, I think we have all of the ingredients to package together and produce an amazing product, and there are some incredibly talented and knowledgeable people within that sector. I'm hoping to help them on that journey, so hopefully you will see more news around that. There are some other smaller by comparison sectors in that they haven't been developed yet, but they tap into health and others, and we're looking to grow those. But I'm afraid I'm not able to make any concrete announcements until we bring someone over the line there.
Okay. There's a lot planned, and I think there's a huge job to do with the strategic plan and the rollout. What would be, if you look through, I think the plan goes for 3 years. For you, what would be the success?
For me, the success has to be that the average businessman in Gibraltar sees a positive result. And I think that's the most important result that I can aim for, right? It's not going to be stats driven, because stats can sometimes be misleading. What I really want to do is so that people see that there's been that culture change where it's moved from a pure regulator to one that is a business focused and facilitates and supports that business community.
You mentioned you're not going to share stats. I guess, how then would we keep it accountable?
No, and absolutely, and I agree that we have to. You've asked me what my personal ambition would be, and that would be to sort of walk down the street. Sometimes when I walk down Main Street, I'll pop into a shop and ask, how's it going? How's business doing? And for them to hear, well, actually, the last time you here, you said, these were some of the barriers we've tackled, what's the result been? And I think the more we do that and the more we listen, the more generous people will be with their ideas. And then we can tap into their ideas and continue to grow together. But you've made a very valid point on data and stats. Shortly after I came in, we published an annual report that contained all of the data and statistics. I'm looking for that to be an annual thing. So you will be able to judge me on the stats if you want to.
I think what I've seen, just incidentally, as someone who is the editor of Thrive magazine and works closely with the GFSB on things like the podcast, and I have seen much more engagement recently. So I think that for me is something that I see, and I think that it feels like there's much more willingness to listen to business community as well. So.
Correct. We're willing to listen. We're happy to listen. I've met with a lot of different business people in Gibraltar, and I always value their input. At the end of the day, they are the experts in their respective fields. We're also trying to improve the way that we communicate with them. So I appreciate that people won't always have the time to look at to read the press release. So we're trying to produce information through infographics. It takes us a lot more time to produce, but I think it's a more meaningful way of trying to connect with the different stakeholders that we have.
Absolutely. The one last thing actually on the strategic plan, which I wanted to come down to, you mentioned in there that there would be a delivery group formed. Is there any update on that?
So that comes down to the individual sectors that we're looking to grow. At the moment, what we're doing is trying to flesh out those plans to see what direction each of those paths could take. And I think as we do that, you'll see the formation of those different groups.
Okay, so more news on that coming soon, right?
Hopefully.
One last thing, and again, it comes down to not necessarily stats or anything like that. I won't put you under pressure, but since you took on the role and to where we are now, is there something in particular that you are especially personally proud of implementing?
I'm really proud of the way that the team have responded. So we have a very hard-working team at the OFT at the moment. We are taking on more people from other parts of government that are moving to work with us. So and as part of that, we're actually rebranding from OFT to business.
Okay.
And that's going to be an interesting journey for us, because we are now, as I said, we have other functions outside of the OFT. We've got the enterprise loan scheme, we've got the business registration. But within each of the sections, from AML to consumer protection and business licensing, the culture change, I can start to see the culture change to be sort of friendlier towards business and more accommodating of business requirements, and that's something that I'm proud of, absolutely.
Good. So it's changing from within, right? It's changing from within.
Yes.
John Paul, it sounds like you've got loads to do over the next few weeks and months and years, and I wish you the best of luck. Before you go, and it's a question I ask all of my guests that come in, what's that one piece of advice that you wish you'd known sooner that you know now?
I knew that this was coming because I've seen, I've heard
Spoiler
your other podcast. I was trying to prepare for it, and I spent a long time thinking about what my response to this would be, and I fall on the same conclusion. It has to be to do your best, and it's something that my parents would tell me when I was younger, and I'd take for granted, but it's something I've always done. Like, I've always worked extremely hard. I've always given everything. I've given my all, and it does matter if you fail. But if you fail and you've tried your very hardest, then what more could you have done? So that's the advice, really.
I guess that's perfect advice, and in fact, it comes from your parents is even better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, John Paul.
All right. Thank you for having us. I hope that the video season is a success.
Thank you.